Hi everybody, welcome to Learn to Program Through Challenges. We are now heading towards our second challenge, so bear with me. So we are heading into challenge 2, and today it's all about the input function and the print function. Let's get started. So what is today's challenge? Today's challenge is to design a program that will prompt the user to input a number, multiply it by 10, and output the result to the user. This is the one we're going to deal with. Now, what is there to remember? So let me move myself up here. So we are going to need to remember that it is all about using decomposition, abstraction, algorithm, and code it. The 4 steps in solving every challenge. We're not dealing with abstraction right now, nor algorithms, nor coding. We will start with decomposition, which is breaking down the problem into smaller problems so that each small problem can be solved to solve the larger problem. So we're going to break this particular problem into 3 parts, and each part we will try and solve. 1, 2, 3. So the first part of this particular problem is to prompt the user to input a number. Take a moment and try and figure out the second part. Pause the program and then come back and find out if you're right. The second problem is to multiply it by 10. Again, try and pause the program and see if you can figure out the third part of this problem, and then come back and check if you're right. The third part of this problem is to output the results to the user. So those are the 3 smaller problems we need to solve in order to solve the big problem. So we're going to start with the first problem, which is prompt the user to input a number. How do we do that? Now, when we say prompt the user to input a number, that's the first part of this problem. All it means is you need to put a message on the screen that tells the user, please enter a number. So output a message on the screen that asks the user to input a number. And I've given you an example just now. But this part has 2 bits to it. In order to output, we are going to be going back and looking back on the print function, which we used in challenge 1. So just in case, if you didn't or you don't remember taking part in challenge 1, or you didn't do it, then can you quickly flip back to the challenge 1 video and take a look? Those of you who did do it and have forgotten, which is natural, flip back to that video, take a look at it, because we're going to be using it today. So the second part of this problem is input a number. Now, input a number we've not met before, but essentially all that requires is take the number that the user has entered, take it in, and store the number. That is the second part of this. So take in and store the number the user enters. So we've kind of broken down the first of the 3 problems. Let's move to the second. The second part of this problem is multiply it by 10. Now, multiply what by 10? Essentially, multiply the number that you've taken in and that you've stored. Simply multiply that number by 10. So that is the next step, written out simply and broken down. The third problem to solve is output the result to the user. Now, whenever we see the word output, it usually means put a message on the screen so that the user will know something. In this particular case, we need to give the user the answer to the number being multiplied by 10. And the simple way to do that is output the results to the screen. Again, we should know from challenge 1 that anything output means print, means using the print function. So these are the 3 steps of the decomposition. We've broken it into 3 smaller problems, and then we've kind of figured out how to solve those problems. So what comes next? Abstraction. Now remember, abstraction is focusing on the details that will help you and ignoring any distracting details that actually don't contribute to solving the problem. So here, let's look at the problem. Are there any distracting details we really need to ignore? And it is such a small problem that most likely there's probably very few things that are distracting you. But we can pick up one or two things just so that we kind of begin to think about abstraction a bit more. We can ignore issues relating to which type of program or the way we're going to do the program or how long the program must be. We can ignore things like which particular words do we need to use to ask for the input, which particular words are we going to use to put the message on the screen. All of these, you really shouldn't dwell on them too much. All you need to do is assume that you can use simple messages or simple language and try not to get distracted with overthinking these issues. So that's abstraction dealt with. As I said, there are very few bits of abstraction for this particular challenge. Oh, so what comes next? It's the algorithm stage. Now remember, an algorithm, it's the stage of the whole challenge where you actually put all the little steps into the right order so that they actually solve the problem. Remember, if you think back to decomposition, we've literally begun to create the algorithm. All we need to do is make sure they are in the right steps or in the right sequence so that when they are run, they produce the right result. So step 1 output a message on the screen that asked the user to input a number. Step 2 was about taking in that number and storing the number that the user entered. Step 3, you take the stored number and you multiply it by 10. Step 4, output the results to the screen. Now, as you can see, when you write an algorithm, all it is it can be in simple English, it can be even in shorter phrases, or it just needs to make sense in whatever language you're speaking. So this is the basic algorithm for solving the challenge number 2, which says design a program that will prompt the user to input a number, multiply it by 10, output the result to the user. So what's the next step? We've got the algorithm, we've solved the problem, at least we think so. So we actually have to code it. That is the next step. Now, before we finish the algorithm, and before we start coding, we are going to do one or two things more. Now, our algorithm makes sense on the whole, but there are one or two bits that we really need to start considering at this stage. And if we introduce it now, it will help you later. So we are going to think about stage 2 and 3. In stage 2, we take in a number and we say store the number. Now, where do we store the number? In programming, we need to store the number, or we normally store the number in a place in the memory. And usually we give that place, that location where we store that number, a name. The name that we give it should give us some indication of what kind of information or data it is holding. So here, when we get to this stage, we are storing a number. And when we store a number, we call it a variable. The location in memory where we store the number and which we give a name to indicate the kind of number it's holding is called a variable. So in this particular instance, we can call the variable num. So take in and store the number the user enters in a variable called num. Okay, now how does that help us with step 3? Just a few points. The variable, when you actually name a variable must start with a letter, it must have no spaces, and give the user an idea of what it holds. We're going to use the variable num, and in line 3, we now can go back to that memory location, have a look at what's in there, and take the number out and multiply it by 10. So that's what we do. Take the number stored in num and multiply it by 10. Now, and that's another thing that a variable does. It holds data so that it can be used later on in the program. If it wasn't held in a variable, it would just disappear, and you'd have to constantly be re-entering it, which is really not efficient. Lastly, we output to the screen. So we've done that. We solved that, and we hope we've got an algorithm that works now. So the next stage is to actually code it. we've got to put this into a programming language of our choice. So as I told you, most of my challenges will be done in Python. So I'm going to put this algorithm into Python. So we're going to code the algorithm and put it into Python. So step 1, we know before that output we've used before. It is to output any message to the screen, we use the print function. And the print function is followed by brackets, the word print followed by brackets. And within the brackets, we will write the message that we wish to put onto the screen. So here we've got print, please enter a number. Now, whenever you're putting words or text or a string on the screen, using a print statement, it must be within quotes, as you can see in this case. So that's the first step. The second step, take in and store the number the user enters in a variable called num. Now this we haven't seen before, so I'll walk you through this slowly. So when you take in a number, you use an assignment operator or assignments. The equal sign is the assignment operator. It basically tells you whatever is on the right of the equal sign is being put into the variable on the left. So in this case, num is the variable, and whatever input is a function that will pause your program, and it will wait until the user has entered a value or entered something. Once the user has entered whatever information they're entering and pressed enter, input takes that information, data or value, and it will go and store it into the memory location identified by the label num. So whatever the user entered is now stored in the variable num. And that's what you see there. Line 3. Now line 3 is going to be a combination of take the number stored in num and multiply it by 10, and then output the result to the screen. These two parts of the algorithm can be done in one line. You can do it in many ways. There are many ways to roam, but I'm doing it this way, so watch carefully. Here, we use the print statement, which you've met previously, and as you know, the print statement or the print function will output whatever's in the brackets to the screen. So this time we're asking it print num times 10. Print the result of the number entered multiplied by 10 to the screen. So it looks like we're ready, doesn't it? It does look like we're ready to go. However, there is an issue that I have to highlight for you. And this issue happens a lot and comes up many times. So it's better I highlight this to you. So with num, and I'll do that again, with any number you enter using the input function, you're going to have to do what is called typecasting. Now, typecasting is where you use a function that will convert the information and the number entered using the input function into a number. Why? Whenever you use the input function to take in a number from the user, the input function converts that number to a string. Now, a string is a text value. It thinks of 2 as a text value. So in order for any calculations to be done with that number, you need to change it to a number type. The number types that you might have heard of or you might not have heard of are integer, float. Are there any others? Integer, float. The others are different. You've got dates and then you've got Boolean. But integer and float are the two. Float means it's a decimal number. Int means it is a whole number. So in this instance, you will notice that in front of the input statement, I put an int, open brackets, input, brackets, open brackets, close, brackets, close. That int function is deliberate. That will change the number that is collected as a string into a whole number on which calculations can be carried out. So that process is called typecasting. The int there changes the value from a text to a whole number. And when you do that, you should then be able to carry out the calculation in the print statement below. So within this statement here, print num times 10, you should now be able to carry out that calculation. Now, there are a few other things I'd like to point out. I'd like you to observe. Number one, when you use the print statement to put words or text or a string on the screen, you must use the quotes, open and closed quotes. However, when you use the print statement to put a variable, num in this case is a variable, or to put a calculation, the results of a calculation on the screen, you do not need the quotes. No quotes. Another thing that you might notice is that we used star. Star is the mathematical operator for multiply. So that should now satisfy the problem. So what you need now is to actually run that in your Python editor or interpreter. So I've written this program, and this is the program in Python. Print, please enter a number, num equals input, num equals int, open brackets, input, open close brackets, and then print, open brackets, numbers times 10. So if I run that, on this side, you can see, please enter a number. If I enter 56 and then press enter, it's taken in, and the results of it being multiplied by 10 is outputted. So that means our program worked. The whole process has produced the right results. So we've been able to code it. Hey, challenge is completed. So, as I said, I'd like you to try this in your own online Python IDE, and you should get a similar result to the one that I have just shown you. Yes, finally, we have completed our second challenge, and I hope you've been walking with me, and I hope you enjoyed that. There will be more challenges coming. Now, I'm hoping that as we go, we will build up your understanding and your skills to program. For this one, thank you for being with me, and if you really enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe to the rest of this channel. Have a lovely day. This is YJ. Bye.